it was very special and cool to be able to observe some older women passing the torch and making space for the next generation.
Honestly, Josephine, it's a joy to speak with you. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a joy
Uh,
to speak with you as well.
oh, honestly, Curl Power is such a beautiful film. From start to finish, it really is lovely. Um, where did it come from?
Well, honestly, it started just curling in a rec league and having the sort of seed of an idea. I'm not a curler by nature or by upbringing. I played for a couple of years in a beer league, and but as I was playing, I just thought, this is such a cool world, and I don't know much about it. It would be great to get to make a film in this weird, wonderful world. And I also had the urge to make a coming of age film at the time. So I just had that idea and started feeling around and was luckily introduced to the 4K girls who were really unlike what a lot of non-curlers might, like the assumptions we might make about what a curler is. They were charismatic and hilarious and goofy and best friends. And I just thought these are the perfect people to make a film about. So that's where it started. And then it took many years to make.
Well, I was wondering that because this is one of the things I love about this is that it's not like you said, described as a coming of age film. This is a film in curling as opposed to about curling,
Mhm.
and we're following these young women. How long were you with them for?
So I started with them when they were 14. One of them was 15, but most of them were 14 years old until they were 18. So it was 3.5 years ish of actual filming. So yeah, basically right until they finished high school, we kept filming. So it was a long time.
Yeah, I love that the film, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. The film talks about time, and we watch them grow, and see how curling is such a part of their lives, but it's not all of their lives. This is something that has really been a benefit for them. And I know we've heard before how young people benefit from team sports, but spending all the time with the 4K girls, what made curling unique for them?
Well, on the one hand, they came by it naturally. There, three of them have mothers who are elite curlers, and they were raised in the sport, so to speak. So their coaches are also their moms, and they've had huge accomplishments themselves. And so, growing up in that kind of world, it was natural for them to give it a shot. That said, they have siblings who don't curl. So I think what really kept them in it was that friendship element. And curling became, on the one hand, just really enjoyable. I mean, curling, it's like one of those things where it's really challenging when you're starting out and you're not very good. So for them, when they were really at their younger stages and they weren't so experienced in the sport, often it was super frustrating and your improvement can be like pretty slow. It's not like a quick rise. And and I think the friendship is what led them to stick it out despite that, and gave them this anchor through their sort of like chaotic teenage years, that other people might find in other sports, but I think curling is particularly unique. The community element, the way that uh, when you come off the ice, you spend time with your opponents and you socialize with them. It's really different, I think, from a lot of other sports.
And it's interesting you talk about them being not that great at the beginning. You see them at camp and they're saying you might have to get worse to get better. And them sort of wrestling with that as they're frustrated, but they're also improving and growing. I think it's this is a film about relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's so beautiful. I mean, like you said, you haven't done a lot, but spending time with the girls, how did the principles of a team help them as they grow into adulthood in your mind?
Um, well, you, I think being on a team, especially a team like in a sport like curling, once again, where there's you know, each of them has a lot riding on their shoulders at any given moment. When you're throwing your rock, it's all, that's what makes or breaks the game. Each one of them has this moment, right? But overall, it's a collective energy that they have to maintain together. If someone has a dip or someone's struggling, especially mentally, emotionally, it has a huge impact on the outcome of the game and on the outcome of the team long term. So especially going through all of these natural challenges of teenagehood, um, they learn to, I guess, like have the endurance within those relationships to stick it out and continue to show up for one another, even when it wasn't so easy. And they also kept showing up for themselves as individuals, even when they might lose motivation momentarily or struggle with something. And yeah, I think those are, if we're kind of getting virtue speaking, I guess, so to speak, like those are things, habits or skills that carry forward into adulthood really well. I think a lot of us could benefit from having practiced that as teenagers a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I love about this film is um, there's a real thing happening here with intergenerational impact. Like you focus on their mothers, and you focus on, and there's one of their grandmothers is in it, and they're the way they pour into one another. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, of the intergenerational impact that's happening, because it goes so far beyond the sport.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, like the team has three coaches, their mothers to the girls. And the way that the team speaks about those coaches, they basically call them surrogate moms. They felt like they just had three moms at any given time, plus maybe a couple of other moms who weren't coaching. Um, and I think that's really special and unique to have a sense of community that's not just, your own family unit. And so for I think that yeah, I think that intergenerational kind of I don't know, there's like a constant intergenerational ricochet or balance that was happening for them. They were on this team for many years together. And their coaches weren't, sort of separated out as like a different separate generation that, of authority. They were really kind of like taking care of one another and respecting one another. And so yeah, I think that's really unique and special. And in the film we really wanted to explore that as well. We have a few moments where you see, for example, Brooke and her mother in a bedroom having a really difficult conversation about Brooke's body dysmorphia, and you can see Shannon wanting to help Brooke, but also, it's hard. Like, what do you say? What do you do? You can't force someone out of the spot that they're in and the struggle that they're in. All you can do is listen and try your best to understand. And so there are moments like that throughout the film that felt really special to try to capture that complexity, that challenge of um, being able, maybe intergenerationally, the older folks being able to relate to the younger folks, but also there's no way through it but just keeping going yourself as an individual. So yeah, that was definitely a part of our intention in making the film too, to try to capture some of that.
Yeah, I think it does very well, and it's interesting to hear the girls, especially towards the end of the film, as they're older, you know, excuse me, being almost reflective. Like life happens fast. We stay together through it all. And they're thinking about the passage of time in the same way, almost in the same way that their mothers are looking back and saying, we've been through this. How can we help you? I want to hear you. It's really interesting to see how they have a sense that their lives are ahead of them, but they also sort of, there's this, I don't know, there's this power in passing the torch too. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you see that. I felt the same way, and just as an observer on the sidelines, that was powerful to watch. We like to think of ourselves always as like the star of the show. Like we all in our own little, boxes. We think we're the center of the universe, and it's cool. It was very special and cool to be able to observe some older women passing the torch and making space for the next generation and having a sort of narrative about who's at the center of things. It's not just about, me, myself, and I.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You don't have to answer this, but I'm just curious. What did you learn about yourself or your life from working with these young women?
So much. I learned a lot about the kind of community that I'd like to have as I age and whatnot. I actually had my first child in the middle of making the film.
Congrats.
So I got thank you. Yeah, I got pregnant just shortly into beginning the process, and had Freya halfway in, and then was raising like a newborn in the final stages of the filmmaking process. So that was on the one hand like very challenging and difficult to pull off. Thankful for like an amazing team that helped come together to make it possible. But also I got to kind of almost switch positions in the making of the film, from feeling a little bit more maybe kinship naturally to the younger girls who are in the film, maybe feeling a little bit like an older cousin or something like that in relation to them. And then as I was making the film, learning about motherhood and parenthood, and getting to kind of sort of switch points of
Yeah.
view. And the film really like looks it, like you said, it's all about relationships, and both friendships and also familial relationships. And so yeah, it was very special for me to get to kind of switch positions in the making of it.
That would be so interesting. I mean, we have two kids, two boys. I will say life happens fast. But for you to be watching them, sort of walking with them, and then take another step on the other side of the fence, that's really interesting. Must have changed your perspective on some things, or really helped those relationships in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely felt like a little bit like naturally a little bit more protective and even maternal as time went on, which is a strange thing to notice. But also like I just learned about yeah, like how I want to raise my daughter. You know, it's very like a huge privilege to get to watch five young women being raised, and like how their sort of older generations are attempting to support them and make space for them, and how they're doing that, and the struggles they're going through, even right, that are kind of like in some ways just a part of modern life. Like our like digital culture is really, I mean, amazing and also really challenging for our mental health. And there's a lot of pressure on, especially on young women, on young everybody, but especially young women. And so yeah, I learned a lot about how I'd like to raise my daughter. And yeah, I feel lucky to have been able to make a film that also gave back to me personally.
Absolutely. That's, I think, like I said before, I think this film is special because it's in sports and not necessarily about sports, but it is at the same time, and we see how it affects their lives, but also empowers them for the real challenges outside the rink. I think at one point, one of the coaches says, I don't want to say what happens, but says, in the end, this is a game that brought us together. This is an unbreakable bond. So there is real power in that. I'm thrilled. The film is such a joy. It truly is.
I really appreciate that, Steve.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just as we wrap up, Josephine, what do you hope people take away from Curl Power?
Yeah, well, I hope that, I mean, honestly, I think a lot of times people who are watching and loving it are not just the young folks who are going through it. It's a lot of people who are far past teenagehood, but we still have those sort of experiences and universal experiences deep within us that can feel really great to watch a film like this. So I hope that folks who watch it, whatever age you are, that it helps wake up that part of ourselves that wants to nourish our relationships and our friendships, and remember that it's so cheesy, but like remember that like we get so caught up in our ambitions, and it's like, for example, in curling and their big dreams and goals, and that's all wonderful. But really, life's about taking care of one another, and having good relationships and friendships. So yeah,
I
cheesy,
appreciate.
but that's what it's all about.
No, that's what it is. That's what it is. It's not cheesy at all. That's why it's so grounded in many ways. I think it is. Honestly, speaking with Josephine Anderson, director of Curl Power. Josephine, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks.